What's up, everyone? We're talking about SOAP web services today. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright, so I'm going to talk about 3 different pieces of SOAP web services, how to test them, how to find which ones to use, and how to actually put them into your orchestrations. Alright, we are in the SOAP API Explorer, and we are going to look for a particular operation. So the one we're going to show you here is the expense credit card transactions. So in this particular use case, we want to get some credit card transactions to do something with that data. This is going to be underneath the resource management API. I can use the search up at the top here to find my particular operation. So if I was looking for the credit card transactions, it's going to narrow down my list and I can find which operation I'm actually looking for. There are some other operations here, especially in the credit card expense world, that I can use, but I'm going to specify the get expense credit card transactions. Here's your tester where you're able to adjust your filter and your other different elements within your SOAP request to get your particular pieces of data. This is going to hit the API gateway endpoints from the tester. If you want to get the endpoint for your particular tenant, so that in-tenant endpoint hitting those particular APIs directly. So if you're using those API for integration clients, that will have to use the in-tenant APIs. Those can be found once you log into your tenant using the public web services report. And then you can filter up at the top here. There's all the different web services that you have available. We're going to grab the resource management web service, and then off of the related action you can then download the WSDL. Within the WSDL, at the very bottom, you can grab the location that you'll need for hitting these internal APIs. So the internal, and when I say internal, the in-tenant API. Again, if you're hitting the API gateway, you can grab that directly from the tester. All right, so let's jump to Orchestrate and actually see this in action. I have a very simple API request here that is getting myself a bearer token and then using it in my SOAP transaction. I'm not going to get into bearer tokens. I'm going to touch on API clients in another video, but for this one, just assume that I already have my bearer token because I do. And then we're going to use the send HTTP request to actually get data from those tenanted APIs. So you can't use the send Workday API request unless you're hitting those API gateway endpoints. So for this particular example, we're going to hit those tenanted APIs, and here is my URL. Again, I grabbed that from my WSDL. I structured my request, so the SOAP envelope, based on that WSDL. And to give you a little tip here, you can use Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT to actually give you a sample structure based on a WSDL you dump into it. So you don't have to, fight tooth and nail to get an actual WSDL or SOAP structure that will work for you. Those LLMs are pretty good at parsing some data, so definitely leverage that to not pull your hair out. Alright, so I have my SOAP request. You will notice that the namespaces are a bit different than the ones over in the tester. Again, this is because they are 2 separate endpoints. One is the API gateway, one is those tenanted APIs. Now that I have my request in here, I am sorting on a particular company and a particular status of credit card transactions, and the rest is just giving me page count and some additional information that I've marked as true. Headers, marking the content type as XML as well as the accept And then the authorization, that is that token that I am getting from my API client. And when you're specifying that token in your authorization header, you don't want to specify an authorization in the auth. Those will override each other. And then query parameters, I'm going to leave blank, and then settings, you can update these as needed for those timeouts. And now that I have all that together, I can use my handy dandy debug button. Alright, now I'm going to debug. I'm going to hit get bearer token, going to get my authorization token. Again, I will show you guys how to set up an API client and get that token for your API calls in a separate video, and then we're going to call the actual SOAP request with that token, and I get a variety of credit card transactions from there. And now I can do whatever I need to do with this data in the rest of my orchestration. Just a quick couple notes. I'm going to drop a couple more pieces of documentation around SOAP requests in the video description if you're looking for more information around additional headers and best practices around using SOAP requests. And another note is, if there are REST or Graph APIs that you can use instead of SOAP, I tend to lean more toward those because they are a lot lighter weight. And they are not as cumbersome when it comes to your actual file size, because you have all of those XML tags that tend to bloat those requests. So just keep that in mind. And that's going to wrap this one up. Good luck building your SOAP requests, and we will catch you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.